Hello, hello. This is George Masri. Thank you for joining me once again. This is another episode of the Well Off podcast, and today I interviewed Craig Race and Ryan Fernandes from Lanescape. So they are architects, and they work for a company in Toronto that is helping people develop and create laneway suites that are simple, elegant, and basically add a lot of rent to your property, which is the cool thing. So if you're an investor and you have a property in Toronto and you want to add some additional income, they could be a great resource for you. They're saying that they're basically able to add $3,000 to $5,000 a month of rental income through these suites. So there's going to be a lot of really good things in here for you if you're looking for some creative ways to add value to your property. It can also help you with the BRRRR strategy if your goal is to refinance. So on this episode, we talked about the cost of building a laneway suite, the expected rental income, the concerns if you're a property owner, and some of the challenges that could come with creating these suites, and just general property and zoning requirements. So I hope you'll enjoy the episode. Please be sure to leave us a 5-star review, share this with your friends and family, and if you want to learn more about real estate investing, we have some cool reports that you could download by going to welloff.ca/report. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Well Off podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm here with Ryan and Craig from Lanescape. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Very quickly, I know there's two of you. Usually it's just one guest, but I like to ask you a little bit about your childhood. So maybe where you grew up and just something quick that you remember from back in the days.
Sure. I guess I'll go first.
Yeah.
So my name's Ryan Fernandes, and I was actually born in a small country in the Middle East called Oman. Not a lot of people know that about me. And it's a beautiful country, lovely people, very warm weather. So I'd totally recommend it to anyone. But my parents lived there for about 20 years, and then they decided to move to Canada when I was just about 3 years old, just because there were better opportunities for myself and my sisters. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting fact about myself.
Cool. That's awesome. What about you, Craig?
Well, Ryan's life was far more interesting than mine. I was born near Toronto and spent most of my life around here, but I did get the opportunity to live in the States and travel quite a bit throughout my life. So I've always enjoyed kind of seeing different urban patterns in the way people live. And that's proved to be pretty useful considering how rapidly Toronto is changing, being able to kind of take those lessons from around the world and use it to either guide policy here in Toronto or even just be inspired on different ways to invest in unique housing.
Yeah. So why don't we get into that a little bit? Why don't you guys tell us just really quickly, kind of summarize what Lanescape is and what you guys do?
Sure. So Lanescape is sort of a project manager, although we're also technically an architecture firm. But our goal is to be the key consultant for design and approvals for laneway suites. So we're the one throat to choke, so to speak, when it comes to dealing with your architecture and engineering and approvals for laneway suites here in Toronto.
Cool. So are you guys, it sounds like you only work in Toronto, because I know there are other municipalities that are also allowing either garden suites or laneway suites, whatever the terms are.
At the moment, we're only in Toronto, although Hamilton is making really good progress on their laneway policy. So we're excited to try to start finding projects in that neck of the woods.
Cool.
Okay. But really, there aren't a lot of laneways in Ontario other than those two jurisdictions. So that's our focus for now.
Okay. For those that don't know, can you describe what a laneway suite is?
Yeah, I can take that one. So laneway suites are essentially secondary dwellings that are constructed behind traditional homes that basically abut on a public laneway. So typically there'll be a garage back there. And so these laneway suites, obviously they increase housing flexibility and animate those spaces. And they provide options for people to live close to community amenities. So sometimes these suites can be used for loved ones. Oftentimes they're rented out to tenants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just talking to my neighbor here recently, and he was saying that in their backyard there was this shed that was housing an ex-convict by the previous owner. So anyway, what's the history of Laneway Suites in Toronto? Is it something that's existed for a long time, or is this a new concept?
Yeah, it has existed in Toronto for like basically more than a century. And, ex-convicts were the type of person who almost originated laneway housing in the city, because we have a lot of structures just embedded into our neighborhood fabric that were like horse barns or industrial uses that people started converting into housing as early as the mid 1900s, or possibly before. Obviously more modern examples tend to be examples of high design, like especially before the as of right policy came into place. People with the wherewithal and the resources would buy properties that were lane locked, so to speak, mid-block properties, and seek one-off approvals to build houses on laneways. The more recent policy that's been passed here in Toronto doesn't require that kind of expertise anymore. So it's far more equal in terms of who has access to it and more efficient for approvals and costs. And it's something now that Torontonians can really tap into. It's as of right within our zoning bylaws, and it's easy, which is kind of the first time we've ever had a housing typology that's actually simple and straightforward to get approvals for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of, like, let's say you are a homeowner in Toronto and you've got a lot which allows for this type of housing, or sorry, this type of suite. What would be some of the benefits to you as an owner, and what about as an investor?
Yeah, so financially, the laneway suites make total sense. They're kind of a no-brainer for people that already own properties where you can build a laneway suite. These suites are kind of renting out for top dollar, and I mean, when you look at them, the construction cost is maybe around $300,000 to $500,000 for these, and you're kind of getting rents that are satisfying like the 1% rule. So we're seeing rents anywhere from $3,000 to even upwards of $5,000 on these. So for people that own the lot already, it's a no-brainer. And what we're seeing with investors is that they're kind of cutting up the main house to split that into several units. And then with the laneway suite in addition, you can kind of make the numbers work.
Cool. And that's pretty awesome that you're getting $3,000 to $5,000 a month in rent from these suites. What would be the procedure? Like, again, going back to that scenario, you own a property, you're interested in putting in a garden suite. What do people do? They contact you and you guys start applying for permits, or what does that procedure look like?
Well, first thing to mention there is, so garden suites are different than laneway suites.
Sorry, laneway
Toronto,
suites.
Which
Yeah,
I think you said garden suite.
I may have. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, and that's important to talk about too, because those are forthcoming here in Toronto. Hopefully sometime next year, there will be a policy in place for those. But right now you can only do a detached rental unit where you have a laneway abutting your backyard.
Okay.
And really the first step is to email us so you can see what's possible on your property. There are several companies that offer free assessments to let you know if there are any concerns like protected trees or emergency access requirements that you need to watch out for. But ultimately, if you contact info@lanescape.ca with your address, we can let you know roughly how big of a laneway suite you can construct and give you a couple other high-level insights that'll help you know if it's worth pursuing or not.
Mm-hmm. What could be some of the challenges of putting in a laneway suite?
Yeah, so a couple issues with some of the properties is emergency access. That's one of them. And then also trees, if there are trees kind of impeding the area where you would be constructing. Toronto protects trees that are a certain diameter, and they've got like a private bylaw in place. So that's something that we need to work around if there are trees on the property. And then in terms of emergency access, you need to basically be able to have firefighters get to the suite if there is an emergency. And so access can either be through a side yard setback from the house, or through the lane itself. And there are certain distances that you need to comply with.
Okay. So speaking of this emergency access, is that just to kind of elaborate on that? Is that based on the width of the laneway itself, or are there other factors?
So you need to have, so the specific requirements are you need to have 0.9 meters between your house and the property line, so that firefighters can get through your main house and to the laneway suite.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are distance requirements. So it has to be 45 meters to the curb, which is basically the length of the fire hose.
Yeah.
And then you can have like another 45 meters if they were to put like a pumper truck there, for example,
Sure.
and then reach the fire hydrant.
Okay. And let's say your property doesn't meet those exact numbers. Are you able to apply for a minor variance to move forward?
So in Toronto, they have different provisions that you can comply with if you have what's called like an extended travel distance. And so that allows you to kind of be eligible even if you have up to 90 meters versus the 45. And kind of as a result, those provisions can be either reduced number of windows on the laneway suite, or if you put sprinklers in, that's another way to kind of get around it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Interesting. And what are some of the general requirements that you'd be looking for if you are a property owner? Is there like a certain lot size you have to have in order to put a laneway suite in, or what would be some of the other requirements?
Yeah, so the first thing to check, obviously, is that you're in an area of the city. Pretty much all places of the city allow laneway suites, except one tiny little area. So you need to make sure you're in an area that allows laneway suites. You need to make sure your zoning is residential. And you need to make sure that you have at least 3.5 meters of frontage on a laneway. Those are kind of the three main things. And then obviously you need to be able to satisfy the emergency access requirements.
Mm-hmm. And going back to that cost, you said it could be 300,000 to 500,000. What would make up that amount? Is it like the construction? Is that including the construction, the permits, the fee that the person would have to pay you, or are there additional fees as well?
Yeah, so that is typically the construction costs for the project. Obviously, a lot of the costs are kind of fixed regardless of the size of the laneway suite. So for example, the servicing, those are kind of big costs that regardless of the size of the laneway suite, kind of remain the same. So those costs that I was referring to is pretty much your construction costs there.
Okay. And then there would be additional fees, like consultation fees or whatever to your company, and whatever else there might be, permits and whatnot. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Now, would this be considered new construction? Like, do you have to get carry-on warranty and that type of thing on the laneway suites, or is that a different thing?
It depends on what you want to do with it. If you're planning on selling it within a year of completing construction, then it does have to be carry-on warranted, just like any new home.
Okay.
But if you're intending to own it beyond that, then it's not required.
Got it. Okay, that's pretty cool. And how long would it take from start to finish to build a laneway suite?
We normally suggest between a year and a year and a half, from the day you call Lanescape to the day you get the keys to your new laneway suite. Mm-hmm. And the variance in that time is really dependent on if we have to deal with trees or limiting distance agreements with neighbors and other bureaucratic things that can add time to the project. Also, Sure. How big it is.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this may not be your field exactly, but do you know if there's any sort of financing program to help homeowners with the fees associated, or is it just up to them to get that all sorted out?
There's nothing specific that we're aware of. There are a few brokers that are trying to target laneway suites, but in terms of the financing products, there's nothing specific to laneway suites. It would be the same products you'd use for any kind of additional unit.
Yeah.
Most of our clients, like if you've owned your house or your property for a few years, you probably have enough equity to just take out a HELOC and use that to self-finance. But if you're buying new, you're going to have to find a debt source that is just, either private financing or maybe some kind of institutional stuff.
Yeah. Cool. So start to finish, we said it'll take about 1 to 1.5 years. Are you guys typically getting these homes built, or are your clients getting these homes built by a builder of some sort, or are they usually using prefabricated homes or something similar?
Either or. The majority of our clients just do stick build on site, like traditional construction. But there are several companies who can do like flat pack panel systems. Really, the viability of that is dependent on how expensive your time is. So like if you're doing this as like an investment property and time is of the essence, saving that 1 to 2 months on framing is probably worth it, because it will allow you to just overturn your projects faster. But if you're doing this as sort of like a one-off project, or time is not of the essence, just going with traditional stick framing usually keeps costs a little bit lower when carrying costs isn't a factor.
Right. Do you know approximately how much cheaper it is to go with traditional construction versus prefab?
It's pretty minimal, but when your carrying cost is essentially nothing, it's almost a wash.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I know we covered like quite a bit. Is there anything you guys can think of that would be important for somebody to know if they're looking into putting a Laneway suite?
Well, the most important thing here in Toronto, there are two things that are really exciting about Laneway suites compared to other types of units. The first is that when you apply to put a Laneway suite onto a property, your parking requirement for the whole property goes to 0. So it doesn't matter if you have a 6-plex in the front house. As soon as you put a Laneway suite on the site, you don't have to provide any parking, which obviously is great because it helps avoid minor variances, and it gives you the flexibility to provide parking or not, depending on where your site is. And the other is that Laneway suites are exempt from development charges. So you don't have to pay any parkland dedication or development charges on Laneway suites. They get deferred indefinitely as long as you don't try to sever it, which is impossible anyway. So they're actually substantially less expensive to build than pretty much any other type of housing unit.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think, if you have, let's say, like a single family home on a lot and you put in a Laneway suite, does that automatically change like the zoning, or the property code to a duplex? Or how is it registered? How would it be registered in that case?
No, so they're considered separate buildings. Your main house will stay whatever it is. So if it's a detached house or a semi or whatever, that is what it is. And its zoning requirements are independent from the Laneway suite.
Yeah.
And likewise, when you go to apply for the Laneway suite, it just gets reviewed as the building itself, irrespective of what is in the main house.
Okay. I think the reason I'm asking that, so let's just say in that previous example, you said, let's say you had a 6-plex, but assuming you have a 4-plex, I know that most lenders will do up to 4 units as a residential mortgage. If you have a 4-plex and you add a Laneway suite, now you technically have 5 units, but do you have any idea if lenders will still look at it as a 4-plex and still do residential financing and just kind of factor in the income from the Laneway suite?
They do not. As far as I know, once you hit 5 units on the site, that changes it, regardless of whether they're in the Laneway suite or all in the main house.
Got it. Cool. All right. That's awesome. I'm assuming that Laneway suites would also potentially work as an Airbnb. Do you guys have any info on that? Do you know if there are any rules around doing short-term rentals in the Laneway suites?
Yeah, so I mean, to our understanding, it is possible to do Airbnb in the Laneway suite. However, the same rules apply as the rest of the city of Toronto. And I'm not too familiar with those rules, but I do know it has to be your principal residence, and you can only rent it out for like a certain number of days consecutively. But the rules aren't any different for Laneway suites.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, unless there's anything else you feel like we should share, there's lots here for people to digest. So yeah, unless you guys have anything else to discuss, we'll just move on to the next section.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So the next part is the random five. I'm going to ask you 5 questions and you just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And I guess we'll alternate. So we'll start off with Ryan, then the second question, Craig, and so on. So number 1, Ryan, what's one of your favorite comfort foods?
Favorite comfort food? Probably pizza.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
I was thinking that
It's a pretty basic one, but
yeah. Everybody likes pizza, that's for sure. Okay, cool. Number 2, Craig, what's your earliest memory?
My earliest memory is from the town I was born in, Brantford. It's very vivid. It's one of my friends. I don't remember who the friends are, but one of my friends was riding his bike down the sidewalk, and the other friend threw a hockey stick at him, and it rolled off his handlebars and missed his head by centimeters. And to date, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Cool. That's awesome that you remember something like that. Number 3, Ryan, what's something you wish you'd figured out sooner?
I think, well, I mean, this is related to investing, but when I learned about the burst strategy for the first time, my mind was pretty blown. So that is definitely something I wish I knew about sooner.
Cool. Yeah. And it's definitely an opportunity if you're putting in Laneway Suites, an opportunity to force appreciation and refinance. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, what's the worst or best job you've had?
If you say Lanescape's the worst, Ryan.
The worst job I've had was probably when I worked at Canadian Tire.
Okay.
But I mean, to be honest, I definitely know people that have had worse jobs. So honestly, that wasn't even that bad.
Okay. I was going to say Canadian Tire doesn't sound that bad, but
yeah.
All right, cool. So that wraps it up. How do people reach you? And it's pretty obvious, but maybe you could just say it once again. What services do you provide?
Yeah, so people can check us out on our website, which is lanescape.ca. They can also find us on all the socials. We're on Instagram, I think most actively, but also Twitter and Facebook. And as Craig had mentioned before, if people are interested in learning if they can put a Laneway suite on their property in Toronto, they can send us their address and we'll turn around a report to them within a few hours. And that's absolutely free. And then you can find us both on our social media as well. I'm mostly active on Instagram, Ryan Fernandes 94, and Craig is also on Instagram at Craigatect.
Cool.
Yeah, use those free property assessments. Like honestly, we've done thousands of them. But if your listeners have a bunch of listings they're considering investing in, send us the address of the listings. We use and abuse them. They're free and they're a really good tool to help you start to understand where Laneway Suites make sense and where they don't.
Awesome.
We also do, sorry, just one other thing. We do also hold webinars every month or so. And those are also free and provide information about Laneway Suites.
Cool. All right, guys, thanks a lot for sharing. I hope that the listeners, somebody out there is going to benefit from this and reach out to you guys and maybe get some Laneway Suites built and take advantage. So thanks for your time, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As always, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content. And if you did, I ask you to share this with a friend, with a family member, somebody who might benefit. And it's always appreciated if you can leave us a review, especially if you're listening to it on the Apple Podcasts app, or if you're on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, comment, and your support is always appreciated. Thank you very much.